Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about the history of the Democratic Party, all the way back to its inception. This could become a longer video, so bear with me if you care. If you don't care, that's fine. Click the next video. Anyways, let's get right into this. So the Democrat Party formed all the way back in like 1820, and they formed, they were formed by Martin Van Buren to support Andrew Jackson. And the reason they wanted to support Andrew Jackson was for the Indian Removal Act to be put in place. So they wanted to take all the land away from the Indians and send them along on the Trail of Tears and install plantation owners, white plantation owners, on their land so they could run like slave plantations. Okay, so that is why they formed. So we'll get right into this. Let me pull this up for you. And we're just going to use Wikipedia for time's sake. I know they're not the most trustworthy, but I don't feel like going through absolutely everything, so we're just gonna use Wikipedia. All right, so right here you can see history of the Democratic Party. The party's modern institutions were formed in the 1830s and 1840s, known as the Party of the Common Man. The early Democratic Party stood for individual rights and state sovereignty, but opposed banks and high tariffs. So let's go right down here, and you can see President Andrew Jackson was the first Democrat elected president, and it's crazy to me how much it's changed till today, like the Democrat Party is today, you know, and how little it has changed as well. But yeah, I got some notes. I'm gonna read. I just went through this whole thing and picked out what I care about. But so after Martin Van Buren started this in support of Andrew Jackson, they believed in like an agrarian society, much like Thomas Jefferson did, meaning they believed in farming over industry. And in order to farm, they needed to enslave an entire race of people. Okay. They also believed that like the central government is the biggest threat to personal liberty, which is a stark contrast to the Democrats of today, who are the new machine, But he wanted to end federal support to banks. He was opposed to elites and aristocrats. He distrusted paper currency, and he opposed reform as a movement, like in all forms. So like he opposed reforming the public education system, or opposed creating the public education system, or reforming any of the public education. And the biggest reason he was elected was because of the 1824 compromise, or whatever. What was it called? Basically, in the 1824 election, it was so contested that it came down to the House of Republicans, or the House of Representatives had to pick the president, and it resulted in John Quincy Adams being the president. And so Democrats were, then they weren't called Democrats, but they were pissed, because they thought that Jackson had won the first race fairly. But I don't know, man. I don't know why you would support slavery. Like, let's say, he had no sympathy for American Indians, Native Americans. initiating the removal of Cherokees along the Trail of Tears. Good times, huh? Trail of Tears. At its inception, the Democratic Party was the party of the common man. It opposed the abolition of slavery. Nice. Yeah, they loved their slaves, and not in a good way. Like, they loved to use their slaves. Friggin' Andrew Jackson had like over 300 slaves in his lifetime. Like, how do you... I can't even get behind the concept of owning one person, let alone having 300 throughout your life. It's absolutely insane. Just some quick info about Andrew. He vetoed more bills than all previous presidents combined. That's cool. Thanks, bro. Thanks for helping our nation figure stuff out. Talk about bipartisanship. He had himself a plantation in Tennessee. That's how he became rich. He was a planter. I could say one good thing about Andrew Jackson, though, is that he's the only president in the entire history of America that has paid off the national debt. It's pretty good. But he also created the idea of the spoils system, which is essentially cronyism. Spoils system is like promising your friends if you get elected that you'll give them good jobs. So he is the one who really brought that to America. But in 1830, he signed the Indian Removal Act, which led to the Trail of Tears and pushing all of the natives off of their land and giving it to white planters, essentially. So the man Martin Van Buren that helped him form the Democratic Party, he ran after Jackson did and became president, and he kept the Indian Removal Act, and he kept slaveholders' rights. And during his presidency, in 1840, the Democratic Convention was created, which is... Here's that. And okay, so the Democratic Convention had agreed that Congress has no power to interfere with the control the domestic institutions of several states, and that such states are the sole and proper judges of everything appertaining to their own affairs, not prohibited by the Constitution. So basically, they believed that the states had the choice whether they wanted to have slaves or not. So basically, they were like, we're going to keep our slaves. If you don't want slaves, then that's fine. But we're going to keep ours. All right. So following Van Buren was James K. Polk. Okay. And the only thing really notable about him in his presidency is that he just, again, wanted to continue Jefferson's vision of establishing agriculture with slaves and plantations. He completely opposed industry, just like, the previous. And during his presidency, in 1848, the Democratic National Committee was formed. And this free soil split occurred, which was because of disagreements, I guess, over slavery. Like the Republicans wanted to have the Nebraska and Kansas and Nebraska to not have slavery, and this is what broke a lot of Dems to become Republicans. The Republican Party was formed in 1854 under Abraham Lincoln, and it was formed because of this Indian Removal Act. Okay, like they formed in opposition to the Indian Removal Act and slavery. So, in history, the Democrats are the supporters of racism and segregation and all of the racist things that the right is blamed for today, the left created like hundreds of years ago, like 100 years ago. Okay. Then in 1853, Franklin Pierce was elected, and he's the one who brought on that Kansas-Nebraska Act that I was talking about in 1854, which essentially repealed the Missouri Compromise and led to Bleeding Kansas and Republicans taking over. So, well, and the inception of Republicans, I should say, the creation of the Republican Party was because he recognized Kansas and Nebraska as states, and he wanted to push the Southern Democrats' laws of slavery to the new Kansas and Nebraska states. And Republicans formed their party in opposition to that, because slavery is bad. Okay. Then James Buchanan, who followed right up behind Franklin Pierce in 1857, he was also a Southern Democrat. He wanted fugitive laws. So, like, if your slaves got off your plantation, they could be caught and returned to you. He also wanted to acquire Cuba, where slavery was already legal, and exploit it for its resources as well. And because of that, the North Dems split from the South Dems, which gave the path for Abe Lincoln to be elected and end slavery. And speaking of that, if you've ever seen that's not there, but I'll just tell you. For the 13th Amendment, you know, the amendment Lincoln put forth to abolish slavery, of the Congress that voted on it, 118 out of 118 Republicans voted yes to pass the bill, while only 19 out of 82 Democrats voted to pass the bill. Okay. For the 14th Amendment, 0 Democrats voted. And the 14th Amendment was to guarantee black citizenship rights. For the 15th Amendment, which was the right to vote, again, 0 Democrats. Republicans are the ones who passed these bills. Something to think about. All right. So after Buchanan, I think the next Democratic president was Andrew Johnson. Yes. Okay. Yeah, you see that? The Senate passed the 14th Amendment by a vote of 33 to 11 with every Democratic senator opposed. You read that? Realizing that the old issues were holding it back, the Democrats tried a new departure that downplayed the war and stressed such issues as stopping corruption and white supremacy, which it wholeheartedly supported. Wholeheartedly. He also vetoed the 1865 Civil Rights Act and said it discriminated against whites. What a friggin' racist. Look at this. Yeah. Even after the veto of the Freedmen Bureau's bill, moderate Republicans were hopeful that Johnson would sign the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which had passed Congress with nearly unanimous support from Republicans. Though most of Johnson's cabinet urged him to sign the Civil Rights Act, the president vetoed it, making a permanent break with the moderate faction of the Republican Party. In his veto message, Johnson argued that the bill discriminated against whites and a dangerous expansion of federal power. Within 3 weeks, Congress had overridden his veto because he was a racist. These people. And right about during this time period, you had the birth of the most racist organization of all time, the Ku Klux Klan. 1866, Ku Klux Klan formed as a sort of militant wing of the Democrat Party. Okay, and Nathan Bedford Forrest was the first Grand Wizard in 1867, and they murdered thousands and beat thousands in order to suppress the black vote. Okay, they didn't want Southern blacks voting. They didn't want any blacks voting. But eventually, that Klan, that version of the Klan, was disbanded by Nathan Bedford Forrest, because of the violence. But so after Andrew Johnson, the next Democratic president that's notable is Woodrow Wilson. And let me tell you, if this man is not the most racist of them all, I don't know. He resegregated the government, well, branches of the government, meaning he made it so that if whites and colors were together, not anymore. Segregate them. He fired 15 out of the 17 black supervisors that were in federal service, and he screened Birth of a Nation at the White House, being the first film ever played there. Now, if you don't know what Birth of the Nation is, it is a literal KKK film. Here's some quotes from him. The white men of the South were aroused by the mere instinct of self-preservation to rid themselves, by fair means or foul, of the intolerable burden of governments sustained by the votes of ignorant Negroes and conducted in the interest of adventurers. How the hell did this guy even get into power? Like, what? And just to show you, the first 5 or 6 elected officials of color were all Republicans. In fact, Democrats didn't even elect a black official until 1935. That is so messed up. So messed up. All right. So after Woodrow Wilson, you got FDR, who literally changed, and he was president from 33 to 45. He literally changed the meaning of liberal to those who support his New Deal, and conservative to those who opposed it. So the reason that the parties switched was because they just changed the terms. They do that a lot. Democrats like to change words to fit their narrative. Okay. And by no means am I saying that the Republican Party of today is not just as bad, because they're all bad. I think all the political parties suck. But I'm just pointing out that when someone on the left accuses someone on the right of being a racist, that being on the left gives you historical precedent of supporting racism. So where's the logic there, you know? But he you know, and FDR made the New Deal, right? And the New Deal was intended to prevent another depression. And in fact, it practically enslaved black people again to the government, because now they became dependent on the government for money or for their survival. You know, you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach him to fish, feed him for a lifetime, that style, you know. So I think FDR was pretty racist too, you know. And he totally flipped the Democrat Party, because if you remember back in the inception of the Democrat Party, Andrew Jackson, he was absolutely opposed to reform. And FDR here is nothing but reform. In fact, it's borderline like communistic ideology, like government-funded healthcare and social programs. That is communism. Like I don't know. And he used the New Deal to entice black voters to join the Democrat Party, and that's where you see the switch, is at FDR. He lured in all of the black voters because of the New Deal. They were getting benefits from FDR, so they voted for him again. That's how he was a 3-term president. Meanwhile, during World War II, he was incarcerating Japanese Americans solely for the fact that they were like Japanese, and because of Pearl Harbor. Like, what a racist. How does that work? When you come to America, you become American. Doesn't matter where you're from. But another product of Southern Democrats were the Jim Crow laws, the Black Codes, as they're called. They were created by Southern Democrat legislatures, and they required blacks to accept like absolutely terrible work contracts. It would limit their mobility, and it would completely deny them of citizenship rights, which were already given to them with the 14th Amendment. Yeah. So, again, Democrats trying to take away the rights of black people again. And you'll see this recurring theme over the decades of Democrats trying to take away your personal liberties. And it primarily affects the African American community. It's just ridiculous. Between 1889 and 1918, there were 2,500 black people that were lynched, which is strung up and killed by Democrats. It's just abhorrent. And because of these laws, African Americans had very few economic possibilities, very few education opportunities, inadequate housing, high rates of death, disablement, and poverty. So thanks, Democrats. Again, you're racist. Something that was interesting that I saw when I was doing this research too was that when JFK was in office, he wanted to take Cuba just like Buchanan did in the original Democrat Party back in the 1850s. You know, I just thought that was weird, but JFK was pretty cool. He did a lot of social programs, so that like social reform programs. And then you have good old Bill Clinton and his legendary 94 crime bill that our boy Biden had supported so fervently. And his wife Hillary referring to repeat offenders as super predators, African American super predators. This is Hillary Clinton, almost the leader of the Democrat Party. saying this. And, you know, it's just the history of racism in the Democrat Party has always been present. And the entire time, they're constantly accusing the right of being racist. When Republicans, since its inception, has been against racism. Republicans were formed to fight slavery and to end the Trail of Tears. So calling a Republican racist, it makes no logical sense. I don't understand it. And you could say, you know, with the party switching around FDR, that the Republicans became the Southern Democrats, but they're not. The Southern Democrats are still present. They're still out there. So it's I don't know, man. It's all a friggin' total crap show. But I don't know. That's just some information I wanted to show you guys, and I want to follow it up with our current president, Democratic president, and we'll show you. I'll just show you a couple clips of how racist this man is, and I'll end the video there.
You got the first sort of mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice looking guy. I mean, that's a story, man.
Unlike the African American community, with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community with incredibly different attitudes about different things.
You cannot go to a 7-Eleven or a Dunkin' Donuts unless you have a slight Indian accent. I'm not joking.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out what you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black.
You ain't black.
It's an indicator.
What?
It's a way of saying, we got y'all. It's a way of saying I can be overconfident because I...
Cool.
Let the big banks once again write the wrong list. Unchain Wall Street.
Pander. Fail pander.
Put y'all back in chains.
And I can tell
And
you,
pissed.
as someone who was a little brown girl, I found Joe Biden's words very condescending indeed, and I think a lot of other brown girls would have felt the same way.
I think the two-party system, although my Democratic colleagues don't like me saying this, I think the two-party system is good for the South and good for the Negro, good for the black in the South. Other than the fact that they still call me boy, I think they've changed their mind.
Biden sought and received support from Mississippi Senator James Eastland, the Democratic chairman of the Judicial.
James Eastland, as well as Helms.
In terms of foreclosures, in terms of bad loans that were being, these Shylocks who took advantage.
Specifically, have you taken a cognitive
No, I haven't taken a test. Before you got in this program, you take a test where you're taking cocaine or not? What do you think, huh? Are you a junkie?
What do you say to President Trump, who...
Why in this nation do black Americans wake up knowing that they can...
Like, this man is so racist.
Of course, they're just living their life.
He doesn't care about you.
When this thing, now is the time for racial
All he cares about is power.
We have such an opportunity now to change people's lives for the better. It's about who we are, what we believe, and maybe most importantly, who we want to be. When I marched in the civil rights movement,
He didn't.
I did not march with a 12-point program.
He didn't march at all.
I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes.
I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black school in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was in law school.
That's called cultural appropriation, right?
I was not part of that. I'm serious.
Coined by the left.
I'm not big on flak jackets and tie-dye shirts and, that's not me.
More than once, advisors had gently reminded Mr. Biden of the problem with this formulation. He had not actually marched during the civil rights movement, and more than once, Mr. Biden assured him that he understood.
His aides went back.
30 years ago, Nelson Mandela walked out of prison and entered into discussions about apartheid. I had the great honor of meeting you. I had the great honor of being arrested with our UN ambassador.
What a liar. Like, why is this man even famous? He shouldn't even have any power.
I think it's 3 times now. You said that during a visit to South Africa, to visit Nelson Mandela, which I know was a very memorable visit for you, that you were arrested when you were there. Your campaign has come out since and said, no. You were separated from other people at the airport. Why?
Because he's a liar.
I was not able to move. I guess I wasn't arrested. I was stopped. I was not able to move where I wanted to go.
Oh, this is my favorite one.
But I didn't know any black people. No, I really didn't. You didn't know any white people either. That's the truth. And I was the only white employee here. And Cornwell was a bad dude.
He was a bad dude.
And so he was up on the board, wouldn't listen to me. I said, hey, Esther, you, off the board. I'll come up and drag you off. Well, he came off, and he said, I'll be waiting for you. He was waiting for 3 guys in straight razors. Not a joke. There was a guy named Bill Wright, Mouse, the only white guy, and he did all the pulls. He was the mechanic, and he cut off a 6-foot length of chain. He folded up, he said, you walk out with that chain, and you walk to the car and say, you may cut me, man, but I'm going to wrap this chain around your head. So
what a freaking racist.
I said, first of all, I said, when I tell you get off the board, you get off the board, and I'll kick you out again, but I shouldn't have called you. Esther Williams, I apologize for that. I apologize, but I didn't know that apology was going to work. He said, you apologize to me? I said, I apologize for that, not for throwing you out, but I apologize for what I said. He said, okay, close the straight razor, and my heart began to beat again. So I learned about roaches.
What?
President is talking about the continuing.
And thank you, Mr. Reagan. You're legendary. Your content's great. But do you see what I'm saying? Like, historically, Republicans have been driving social reform in order to give people their rights. And at every step of the way, oh, I even forgot one. What about the Civil Rights Act of 1964? Friggin', when the bill came before the full Senate to debate on March 30th, 1964, the Southern bloc of 18 Southern Democratic senators and 1 Republican senator, led by Richard Russell, launched a filibuster, which was the longest filibuster ever, I'm pretty sure, and said, we will resist to the bitter end of any measure or any movement which would have the tendency to bring about social equality and intermingling and amalgamation of the races. Bunch of freaking racists. This is what MLK was fighting against. Democrats. Not Republicans. So what happened? How did they convince 90% of African Americans to vote blue? It makes no sense. It's all propaganda. And yet, we just accept it as fact. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Sorry, this one got long. Like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Peace out.